Leila, what a lovely ride, and what a pleasure it was to have a coffee ride with the Chief Executive of the JSE. Dr. Leila Fourie, thank you very much for joining us. What an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for talking to me. It was a wonderful ride on the bike. You can't get weather better than we have in Joburg in the middle of winter, and a very special group of people. So it's a great privilege to chat to you.
Leila, we see on the news every day that people are immigrating from South Africa. You immigrated many years ago from South Africa to Australia, but you've made the decision to come back to South Africa to assume the position of Chief Executive Officer of the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Talk to us about your decision and coming back.
Yeah, Kobe, when I took that decision more than 4 years ago now, and the announcement went out, I had a flood of negative comments. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? We're all trying to leave and you're coming back. And the truth of the matter is that I was actually very happy in Australia. I had a wonderful quality of life. I had my family around me, very special kindred souls in climbing friends. And I took the decision because I'm kind of at the end of my career. I wanted an opportunity to give back. I wanted an opportunity to make a difference, and I really feel that South Africa is at the cusp of an opportunity to really start to reverse all the economic headwinds, the difficulties that people on the ground have experienced. And I knew that the JSE CEO role would provide a platform to really make a difference. And so I came back with a very different mindset than when I left. And it's been a great privilege. I've been in my role now for 4 years, and I'm here to serve and to do as much as I can to uplift and the community and build inclusive markets on the JSE.
But I mean, you've also walked hard miles and deep miles because you've got a PhD in economics. Where did your interest start in economics and the financial markets, for that matter?
Actually, I didn't grow up surrounded by economists and financial specialists, but at the heart of economics is the allocation of scarce resources. And I grew up in a very large family. I've actually got 10 siblings, although I only grew up with half of them. And so you learn to understand scarce resources and compromise and what is the best allocation of resources. And that's something that sparked my curiosity about life in general. And from there, it developed and evolved. I didn't start off in that space, and I grew into financial services, and I've really been in financial services now for more than 20 years, and still fascinated by the concept of how we allocate scarce resources. We've seen that through the pandemic and through the supply chain disruptions, which I think are going to carve new relationships between new parts of the world and new trading relationships through different countries.
While we were riding on the bike, you mentioned scarce resources and your appreciation of nature. Now, not a lot of people know that you have a passion for rock climbing. So when I think of rock climbers and people hanging from a mountain, my stomach churns, but you seem to thrive on the fear that other people have. But it's not just the fear. Tell us more about your rock climbing and also the lessons that you've learned from rock climbing.
I started off spending time in the mountains, largely when my children became teenagers and developed their own interests. And my first mountain hike was Machu Picchu, and from there I evolved and I went into high altitude mountaineering, and then I moved to Australia and got caught up with a crazy crew of women climbers who are very close friends of mine now, and I learned the joy of technical rock climbing, and it's been a wonderful journey because when I'm on the bike or riding, as we were talking about this morning on the bike, I'm constantly thinking about work. But when you're on the rock, all you concentrate on is that very next handhold. And as you so rightly point out, there are lessons that you learn and you apply them as repackaged knowledge, both in your personal life and in the workplace. And I've learned lessons of endurance, I've learned lessons of trust. When you're hanging off a precarious cliff face and you are trusting exclusively in one individual who is what you call a belayer. They control your rope. If you fall and they're not concentrating, it could be fatal. And so you learn to trust the person who's controlling your rope when you're climbing. And you also learn strategy and tactics. Before I climb a route, I look very carefully at where all the handholds are, and the more difficult the route, the better you have to plan, because it's very difficult if you take a wrong move and your body is in the wrong direction to undo that move and start again can be quite precarious. And I suppose the biggest lesson that I've learned in climbing, and I learned this when I went on a course to lead climb, was to learn how to fall. And we all, none of us want to fail in real life, and definitely not when you're hanging on a rock. And it was quite terrifying initially, and I've now learned to embrace that if you're not falling, you're not advancing. And so in real life, if you're not failing, you're not pushing yourself to your limits. And so I challenge people to think about their perception on failure. Is it a good thing or a bad thing? If you haven't failed ever, or in the last year or two, are you really pushing yourself? And so I've just embraced so many wonderful experiences, but most of all, I just love the simplicity of being out in nature and getting to see vistas that very few people ever get to see.
You're talking about failure, and today we're also celebrating women and having fun as women. We needn't just be in the boardroom making business decisions, we can also have fun on the bikes. But you mentioned failure. Many women perceive too, if you don't have work-life balance, then you're a failure either as a mom or you're a failure as a businesswoman. How do you manage work-life balance and also your personal life?
Work-life balance is a very precarious and difficult thing, and it's different at different stages of your life. I remember when my kids were small, that churning, difficult feeling of being torn between giving your all to your company and making sure that you're there for your children. I had a very good support structure, family members who helped me when I was working to fetch and carry kids. And I was very strict at attending all their sports events. That was just very important for me. And I also, we had very specific things as they were growing up, like I would read to them every night, and they still speak about that. My son said to me the other day, and he's now, a taxpayer status. And he said to me, Mom, I didn't realize some of my friends never read very much when they were growing up. And I always took for granted how many books you read to us. And I'm so grateful for that now. And so it's choosing those small little things that you can do that create an identity with your children and making the most of the very brief time that you might have with them. There are sacrifices. As you move on to the next stage, which is grandparenting, it opens up a whole new vista of opportunities to spend really quality time. And so it's a very difficult balance to get right. And often we fail, and I failed in that a couple of times. And you just get up and really focus on being better next time.
Leila, tell me about your experience as becoming a grandmother. I mean, that must have been an absolutely unique experience in your life.
I'm a very proud Gogo. And being a grandparent gives you a perspective uniquely different, and only grandparents who might be listening to what I'm saying will really understand and resonate with what it means. I was very, very privileged to be present in the actual birthing room. I have a very close relationship with my daughter-in-law, and it was a spiritual, almost transcendental experience, and the love you have for your grandchildren transcends anything you can ever imagine. So I'm very humbled and very grateful. Family is a very, very important part of my life.
As women, we are nurturers, so family is very important. But I think as women, we also have a role to play in South Africa. You've mentioned upliftment, you've mentioned skills, etc. What is your wish for the women of South Africa on Women's Day?
Kobe, I'd say my wish for the women of South Africa is that they back themselves, that they believe in themselves. If I look back at my former self, what would I tell myself, and what lessons do I wish I knew? And that would be to be much more confident. I had a lack of confidence when I was growing up. And women of South Africa are the backbone of society, especially the Gogos, especially women who have had deep experience, and those Gogos who actually have worked menial, very difficult jobs, and physical jobs throughout their lives, but yet are, can I ask if we can redo that? Can we redo that?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to say menial.
Yeah, it's okay.
That's terrible.
just
Make
carry
sure
on.
you don't include that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I really, the people I really hold in high regard in our society are the Gogos. Those women who have brought up, many of them have brought up their families single-handedly. They've instilled their value systems into their children. They've worked incredibly hard, and they are often the backbone of society. And so I would say to young women of today, believe in yourself and back yourself. Be confident, have a go, and make sure that you adopt and grasp every opportunity that comes your way.
Leila, you've shared a lot of wisdom with us. And today, together, we had the privilege of also supporting a cause that is very, very close to your heart, and that is Change Your Life. So this morning we cycled 60 kilometers together with all the rest of the Purple Turtles and Change Your Lifers. But talk to me more about your passion for giving back, and also Change Your Life.
Well, a value system that's very close to my heart is making sure you pay it forward, that you give back. And especially if you're in a position of privilege. And Change Your Life was born of a very tragic situation. One of the JSE employees, Mike Thompson, tragically lost his life in a violent crime incident in South Africa. And Ursula Duploi, who was actually sponsored by, in the conceptualization by Russell Lopesha, my very esteemed and very impressive mentor and predecessor, decided to do something about violent crime in South Africa. And so they created the Change Your Life cycle tour. And basically it was to get violent crime off the streets. And it started off with a DNA project which funded the legal aspect or the legal side of getting DNA accepted on crime scenes. More than 90% of offenders reoffend, and so that DNA is critical to unlocking and solving crimes. And the other lesson that project taught Change Your Life is that where the crime emanates from is through youngsters. And they start off with menial, they're used in crime syndicates, in menial crimes, and they do 10 or maybe 12 menial crimes, and then they move on to more violent crimes. And so if you can start to direct the actions right at the source where children are growing up, you will make a difference to crime. And so out of that was born the Martin Dreyer, first the canoeing academy. It then became, we added a running, and then also, of course, a cycling academy. And they are in the Valley of 1,000 Hills. We also support Namato. And it's a tremendous group of CEOs who get together to do something that's bigger than themselves. And we do something that we love. We stay fit and healthy, and yet we also have an opportunity to give back. And it's wonderful to get to know some of the cyclists and some of the amazing athletes that Change a Life has funded. And so the JSE is very proud to be associated with Change a Life, and very excited to see the real genuine difference that it's making on the ground.
Leila, you are indeed a role model in my life, and also in many other people's lives. But surely you must also have a role model, somebody who inspires you, somebody who motivates you. Tell us more about that special person.
So, of course, my mom is a very strong role model because of her diligence, her intellectual curiosity and love for reading. But if I were to look further afield, from when I was very small, my role model was Marie Curie. And because she was a Jewish female scientist who won not one but 2 Nobel Prizes. And I read her life story when I was young, and I still have the book. And her tremendous generosity of spirit really resonated for me. If you have the mental capacity to achieve 2 Nobel Prizes, you can imagine your thirst for knowledge. And yet she made a pact with her sister to fund, she worked as an au pair to fund her sister for 5 years through university before she began studying. And her sister then reciprocated and funded her. And it's wonderful to read of her life, how she went through prejudice and very complex difficulty around trying to balance a young family with the incredible investigation that she did in her lab. And I remember reading about how she used to creep into her lab late at night to research, because she had been looking after her children earlier. And so that was always a wonderful role model for me. More recently, I'd say Caster Semenya has been a tremendous role model, and the court case that she's just won after 4 years of having to chemically balance her testosterone, and the humiliation and the difficulty that she must have gone through on the global stage. It gave me great pleasure and great pride to see that she had not only given a voice to females, but actually given a voice to South Africa as a sports contributor on the global sports stage. So I think role models come from many sources, and whenever I meet somebody, I try to identify what I can learn from them, and what characteristics they can improve in me. And so it's not just the famous people, it's everyday interactions that role model and build my personal armory.
Leila, talking about the global stage, as a South African businesswoman, you've won various accolades, but you've also made your mark on the international stage, where you've chaired and hosted panel at the International Economic Forum in Davos. I mean, how do you prepare to host an event of such a magnitude?
It's very important for me to make sure that people in emerging markets, and particularly on the African continent, give a voice to the plight of the emerging markets. And so when you get an opportunity, whether it's at the World Economic Forum in Davos or on the United Nations sustainability forums that I speak on, I see it as partly a duty and an obligation, and partly a great opportunity to advance an argument for people to think more broadly than the developed world dogma and the priorities that what we would say the global north would force on emerging markets in the global south. And so when I prepare for an event of that nature, it's really all about just being authentic. It's about doing enough research that allows you to craft an argument that is convincing, logical, and sound, and pointing out factors that people would not have thought about, that really highlight the importance of thinking about problems from an emerging market lens. And so I consider it a great privilege, and I'm very humbled to be able to represent South Africa on some of these forums, and I would love to see more women and more South Africans generally giving a voice to those things that really matter, whether it's climate change, poverty, the advancement of education, technology and access to data as a human right. There are so many different causes that we need to give a voice to, and we all have a role to play. It's not just one or two people.
Dr. Leila Fourie, thank you for a lovely coffee ride this morning on the bicycles, and thank you for your generous time today also to speak to us, and happy Women's Day.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely lovely to chat to you, and to all the women out there, happy Women's Day. I wish you well, and I hope that you are celebrating with those people that matter and enjoying moments that matter.